The American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, is one of the greatest events in world history. A nation that proclaimed that all men are created equal continued to hold hundreds of thousands in the chains of slavery while waging this struggle for independence. This period was not only a war of sovereignty against the British Empire, but also a complex process in which African Americans weighed their own path to freedom. Revolutionary rhetoric and the reality of slavery at the end of the century, while concepts like freedom, representation, and tyranny were being discussed in the colonies. These discourses primarily resonated with enslaved African Americans. Although the rights outlined in Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence theoretically encompassed everyone, in practice, Black people were excluded from this definition. However, this did not mean that slaves remained silent. Many enslaved individuals adapted the cries for freedom to their own situations, appealing to courts or escaping in search of freedom. British strategic move. Dunmore's proclamation. One of the most important moments that changed the course of the war was the proclamation issued in 1775 by Lord Dunmore, the Royal Governor of Virginia. Dunmore stated that every healthy slave belonging to the American rebels who joined the British Army would be freed. This move was more of a military maneuver than a humanitarian one. The aim was both to deprive the rebels of their labor force and to create internal unrest in the southern colonies. Thousands of blacks joined the British ranks hoping to gain their freedom by fighting for the British in units, such as the Ethiopian Regiment. After the war, a divided fate. When the war ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the consequences for Black people varied by region. In the northern states, Vermont, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, laws were passed to gradually abolish slavery, fueled by revolutionary spirit and the influence of religious groups. However, in the southern states, slavery became even more entrenched as a cornerstone of the economic structure. While some of those who fought on the British side were evacuated to Canada or Sierra Leone, gaining their freedom, many faced the risk of re-enslavement. The military mobilization brought about by the Revolutionary War resulted not only in the movement of armies but also in one of the greatest social displacements in the Americas. The chaos created by the war offered enslaved individuals an opportunity to shake the centuries-old status quo. The events that followed further highlighted the relentless struggle between the concepts of freedom and property that formed the foundation of the newly established United States. Waves of escape and refugees of war. A massive wave of escapes occurred across the colonies during the war years. The arrival of British ships in ports meant an escape route for thousands of Black people working on plantations. In South Carolina alone, it is estimated that approximately 25,000 slaves escaped during the war. These people were not only prospective soldiers but also became a vital workforce for the British Army, serving as cooks, guides, engineers, and nurses. However, these escapes brought with them great traumas. Smallpox and famine spreading in crowded army camps claimed the lives of thousands of Black people who set out in search of freedom. British strategic move. Dunmore's proclamation. One of the most important moments that changed the course of the war was the proclamation issued in 1775 by Lord Dunmore, the Royal Governor of Virginia. Dunmore stated that every healthy slave belonging to the American rebels who joined the British Army would be freed. This move was more of a military maneuver than a humanitarian one. The aim was both to deprive the rebels of their labor force and to create internal unrest in the southern colonies. Thousands of blacks joined the British ranks hoping to gain their freedom by fighting for the British in units, such as the Ethiopian Regiment. The Constitution in the shadow of economic interests. When the war ended, the issue of slavery was brought to the table as a national crisis at the 1787 Constitutional Convention. While the northern states defended the principles of the Revolution, the southern states argued that abolishing slavery would be economic suicide and threatened to secede from the newly formed Union. This tension culminated in the famous Three-Fifths Compromise. According to this agreement, every 5 enslaved individuals would be considered equivalent to 3 free individuals in terms of taxation and political representation. This decision was the constitutional enshrinement of a mentality that viewed black people not as human beings, but as political points and objects of property. Religious and philosophical awakening. The birth of abolitionism, the intellectual climate created by the war, accelerated the debate on slavery by religious groups such as the Quakers and some intellectuals. The philosophy of natural rights began to merge with the idea that slavery was not only a political mistake but also a sin in the eyes of God. Pennsylvania pioneered this by passing one of the world's first progressive liberty laws in 1780. However, these progressive steps hit a hard wall with the invention of the cotton gin and the explosion of the agricultural economy in the South. The greatest lesson to be learned from this process is that freedom is an indivisible whole. The War of Independence, with one people breaking their chains while another tightened them, remains one of the most instructive